Hi, welcome to BTA Q&A video number 3. I don't know when the last one's going to be, so this might be the last one. But anyway, I'm going to go over a few questions that were posed, and I've selected about 5 or 6 more. So this is probably going to be about as long as the other videos. So I'm doing it, as you can see, in my garage because my wife really gets annoyed at this kind of silly thing that I'm doing. Okay, number 1 is, what's BTA's songwriting process? Mention multiple methods if there are more than one way. And this is from Carrick Sugden on Facebook. And there's a few questions kind of in this vein that I'll get to in this video. BTA's songwriting process kind of changed with every album. Terminate Damnation was written over a long kind of period of time from different individuals, and was kind of just our best songs that we had culled out of everything else. John wrote a lot of it, and I wrote some of it, and there were other influences in there. So that's how we started. Physics of Fire was written over a fairly short amount of time by really just Alex and I. Now, I'm talking about musically. As far as lyrics, Jason Wisdom wrote all the lyrics for those first 4 albums, and then even had a little bit of, even involved a little bit in the lyrics for I Am, and then I did a lot of the lyrics on I Am as well. But I'm speaking about musically. So Physics was over the short amount of time, was I think 7 of the 11 songs were by Alex and 4 were by me, but mine were the long, ridiculous, expansive songs on Physics. Dichotomy was, John wrote 4 songs, and I wrote 3, and 1 was a mix of things, and Jason wrote 1, and even Lopez wrote 1. But that was done in studios mostly, actually. Was the first time we did that. We did kind of some pre-pro at John Starr's house, and then we couldn't play them live when we went in the studio with Devin, so we had to go through this long process of pre-production with Devin, learning how to play the songs together as a band. And then Celestial Completion we wrote all together, you know, like in a live setting in our practice space, and that was cool. I think that made it turn out really well. Daniel and I wrote the vast majority of that. Jason was involved some in some riffs and some songs, and even John. John and Alex both. Alex had written a riff or 2 that went into the first song on Dichotomy, and he wrote that before he left the band. And then John, the same thing, wrote a riff or 2 that went into Celestial Completion that he wrote before he left the band, but then we recorded it and sort of fleshed out the rest of the song later. And then I Am was probably the most polished, complete thing that we had going into the studio out of all of our albums, because Daniel wrote the vast majority of that album musically, and even wrote a lot of the drums and stuff for it, and had it all sounding honestly pretty decent before we even went in. And so Chris Heaton kind of added his own flavor to the drums a little bit, and then I added some keyboard things in here and there, and I wrote track 5, you know, the instrumental track, and I added some, you know, keyboard sections and intros and segues and stuff. But I mean, the guitar riffs were pretty much done and ready to go by the time we went in by Daniel. So there was a difference in process all throughout, from the really short to the really drawn out, from 1 person writing things to 5 people writing things, from songs being complete by 1 person more or less to 3 or 4 people being involved in a song, so including previous band members. Okay, second question: were there any songs recorded that didn't make it onto albums? And the answer to that is no. When huge bands do albums, they probably write a ton of songs or buy songs or, you know, whatever they do, and they have B-sides and whatnot, but metal bands for the most part don't. I guess some do, but we never did. We wrote what we thought was good, and if we didn't think it was good, we didn't finish writing the song because it was garbage and we threw it away. So So everything that we wrote and completed was always what we recorded in the studio, and that all went onto the album. So there's no chance of any B-sides or anything like that in the future. That's from a Twitter guy named RWS91. Alright, the next question. There were a bunch of questions asked by Sean McGuire on Facebook, and I'm going to get to two of them. What was the creative process behind the Requiem Aeternam trilogy and Celestial Completion? Who came up with the idea? What was it like recording it? And most importantly, who came up with the bone-crushing riffs at the beginning and the end of Part 2? The idea for it to be a trilogy was Jason's idea. I wrote, the instrumental part on piano, track 5, and that's the first part of the trilogy. And then track 6, the second part of the trilogy, was one of those conglomeration pieces, and that's actually where what I was referencing earlier with John being involved with some of that, even since he wasn't in the band anymore, but before he left, he helped structure that song and wrote. It's kind of mixed up in my brain at this point, but he wrote about half of that song, and I believe that the first riff and the last riff were his things. I think. So I think those were John's riffs, and it was great recording, and we had a blast recording Celestial Completion, all of the tracks. But Jason had the idea to tie them together, and so there were 3 distinct songs that we just tied together. And then another question from Sean McGuire is, did BTA ever cover songs, and if so, what was the band's favorite covers to play? We did How Great Thou Art, but that was only covered lyrically, not musically. And we covered Oh Holy Night, which again was more or less the same thing. Other than that, we never actually did cover anything, but we talked about covering, we actually talked about covering a country song for a little while, a Garth Brooks song, and we kind of had debates about which one to do, and everyone seemed on board, and then after we decided to do it and started working on it individually, one member who I won't disclose the name of said, "Wait, you guys were serious? We're not actually doing that, right?" And so then we couldn't do it. But there was a time when we were planning to do a Garth Brooks song as a single, as a digital single, and live. So that would have been interesting. Yeah. Okay. What did you think of South Africa? I met you all at Cool Runnings and Johannesburg. That's a question on Facebook from Dion Benneman. Dion, I don't remember you, but we had a blast in South Africa. It's one of our favorite tours we ever did. We played 6 shows in South Africa over the course of about 2 weeks, and a great group of people there named Torchbearers got together and made it happen, and led to believe that some money that they had left from that tour went to help build a school and a squatter camp there, and the concerts were very well attended, a high energy. We just had a blast. So we loved it. In fact, we wanted to come back, and I tried to crowdsource a South African tour, a second tour, but it didn't happen. So that's why we haven't been back. Okay, another question from a guy named David Amaral on Facebook is, it seems to me that no one paid any attention to one of BTA's 3 original guitarists, Sean Cunningham, who appeared as such on Terminate Damnation. I can't really blame them, but regardless, how's he doing now, and what is his new line of work in, if not as a musician? Plus, I read that he had to leave BTA to finish college. If you do know, could you say what his degree was in? That's a good question. Sean did leave, and I believe he did go back to college. I don't know what he got his degree in, or actually even if he finished. Although I'm the only one that was in BTA, the whole existence of BTA up to this point, I've done a pretty bad job of staying connected with previous band members. I haven't talked to John Starr in quite a while. I don't know that I've spoken hardly at all to Alex since he left. I've seen Lopez occasionally at shows when we would play like in Oklahoma City and some other places. Had talked to him, or Cornerstone Festival or something. But Sean is also in that group. I hung out with him a couple times shortly after he left the band, and I just haven't really stayed up with him a whole lot. So I can't really say, to be honest. I am under the impression he still lives in Georgia, and he is doing something that makes him happy. That's kind of embarrassing to admit, but life has so many demands, it's really difficult to stay up with people. So, yeah. Maybe I'll reach out to some of those people and see what they're doing. Okay, last question. Since you did the very last tour to date with the Showdown, do you take responsibility for the lack of high-voltage heavy metal in the world today? That's a question from Sarah Holcomb on Facebook. Yeah, we did 3 tours with the Showdown, and they were an interesting lot, even with the changes in members. Our first 2 tours ever were with the Showdown, and their last tour was with us in support of that last album they did, Blood and the Gears. I don't think that we can take responsibility for the lack of high voltage heavy metal. I feel like we try to do our part, but that's just the nature of the scene. It's but I guess I do take responsibility for the fact that we haven't come out with an album in 2 years and we haven't played any shows in over a year. So yeah, but for the we didn't have anything to do with the Showdown breaking up, and we miss them. And if they were to come back, we would welcome them into into the metal world. So there, I think that's all the questions. So I hope you enjoyed BTA Q&A video number 3.